Decapitate the monster. We have a saying, out of sight, out of mind. But it is going to take a long time for me to get the sight of that police officer out of my mind. With his hand nonchalantly in his pocket and a deliberate knee strengthened by his full body weight on the neck of a fellow human being, whose hands were cuffed behind his back, face down on Mother Earth, with his feet held by a neophyte, while another sat on his back, with a fourth officer standing guard, while Mr. Floyd cried out for his mother and pleaded for his life. The feeling of dread and horror that accompanies this visual is impossible to get out of my mind's eye. This reinforced that my sight encompasses more than what is physically before me, and that my emotions, when aroused, can herald thoughts that under normal circumstances would be considered thoughts of the unforgiving and revengeful. Intentionally or not, we are good Christians, so we stamp out our thoughts as sinful and with prayers of forgiveness for the obvious and unrepentant enemy, turn the other cheek, all in fear of the burning fires of hell, not realizing that for all intents and purposes we are already there, burning in the fires of the consequences of lies, misplaced trust, misdirected values, spiritual and psychological warfare, and overall injustice. I do not know what more we need to experience or witness before we recognize that we are in serious trouble. The public slaughter of George Floyd has enraged the world and seems to be the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. I am a woman of African descent, a mother and grandmother. I have brothers and sisters, cousins, nieces, nephews, grandnieces and nephews, and friends. I love them all and yearn that they have access to the best of life's offerings. I am willing to start with equal opportunity, for there is certainly enough for all. Help me write a story of truth. Help me explain to our descendants how we got to where we are. They need to understand if they are to be a part of the solution. Where's the best starting point? The rape of the African continent, or under the knee of an abusive system? The things we experience today are effects. Their various causes are scattered throughout our history. And believe me, it is complicated. After much deliberation, I concluded that the only way I can give my grandchildren a fighting chance is to attempt explaining where we are now, and by telling them the truth as I see it, which is, we are experiencing and witnessing the inevitable, the full-blown physical manifestation of spiritual warfare. We have been and continue to be deliberately infected with thought patterns that evolve from anger, grief, hopelessness, and pain. The emotions invoked act as viruses. They undermine and compromise our emotional and mental balance and do not support our best interests. We have fought back with a spirit afforded us by the superiority of our genetic codes that refused to be decoded and to erase greatness. Descendants of the African continent are strong and resilient people. The fact that more of us are not emotionally and mentally disturbed, self-destructing machines is a testimony to that miracle. Our children need to be told what transpired so they can have a more balanced understanding if they are to successfully assist in detangling our DNA. We cannot allow them to continue without the full story. The captives from the African continent, who were either war captives, ordinary citizens guilty of petty crimes, or simply kidnapped, lost everything: family, loved ones, their way of life, and the right to practice their spiritual beliefs. They were robbed of their identity and literally brought here naked, not only chained and shackled, but packed one on top of the other in cramped, airless spaces. Can you begin to imagine their mental and emotional state? The fear, bewilderment, and anger. Adjusting to being enslaved, dealing with foreign languages, strange customs, and weather conditions must have been daunting and traumatic. The captives from the African continent had first-hand memory of who they were and were fully aware of the injustice that brought them to the West. They were physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually beaten into submission. Their choices were to live to fight another day or die, and many did die, some in body, some in spirit, but none escaped physical, mental, or emotional trauma. Africans who spoke the same tongue were deliberately kept apart to further disorient, control, and destabilize. As can be imagined, they felt confused, angry, betrayed, abused, desperate. Intentionally, the oppressors reshaped who they originally were by undermining their self-dignity. The message was clear: you are nothing. Your only option is to serve me or die. These were not idle words. They lived it. They were treated and bred like animals, with their offspring being taken away and sold. They had nowhere to vent, no recourse. And just like any other living thing, we suffer or thrive, depending on environment, sustenance, and nurture. So naturally, we began to show the consequences of dehumanization. Each generation inherited the pain, anger, and hopelessness of their ancestors and were further beaten into submission. They did not have a first-hand recollection. They did not have a first-hand recollection of their rich culture and history. And though what they witnessed and experienced resonated doom and gloom, hope was kept alive. The structure of the African family hierarchy was methodically destroyed, reducing the menfolk to boys, shackled and flogged mercilessly, sometimes to death, depending on their value to master and the message he sought to convey. Men were used as studs as they began to breed the Africans with both quantity and quality in mind. Selective breeding, human thoroughbreds. They were another man's property and knew it. With no dependable social or spiritual structure, and no opportunity or experience in providing for themselves. They worked, copulated, and were fed. They yearned for freedom and revenge. Their relevance and safety depended on them giving their waking hours to serving and obeying, while docilely being conditioned into thinking that whiteness was something grand. Well, if not grand, it certainly was synonymous with privilege and power, leading us deeper into the depths of despair with a sense of inadequacy and self-loathing as we acknowledged lack. A self-loathing that has fostered and grew as the slave master ruled by division, with privilege going to those who worked close to massa and to those with lighter skin tones. Self-loathing that is so ingrained that we still discriminate against each other. After emancipation, descendants were treated like outcasts and hated for the very reasons they should have been shown compassion. Centuries of being shredded of dignity, a history of rape, not only of the body but the mind, which was targeted and violated. Everything was done to ensure that deeply rooted self-esteem issues were reinforced. No material wealth was given, and they were not given equal opportunity. They had to claw their way to make a comfortable life for themselves and their families and reclaim their dignity. All this without counseling and therapy to heal visible trauma. The white man's supremacy was seen and felt in every area, with continued oppression fueled by laws that enforce racial segregation and redlined and discouraged the ambitious. With each generation came different experiences that colored how they looked at life. We are speaking about a people who need healing. This situation was not created by those presently in Africa, nor by the children of those exported into slavery. It would seem, though, that the responsibility to rectify the situation for our advancement as a people now lies on our shoulders. Having tolerance for each other, understanding the deliberate psychological ploy used to enslave our minds and set us against each other will help. Though resilient, having endured over 400 years of traumatic physical, mental, and emotional abuse, does have adverse consequences. We have lost some souls. And because the heinous crime of systematic oppression can be subtle, we are all infected and affected on different levels. Like it or not, the inevitable demons of our reactive thoughts and actions have manifested and taken on a life of their own. We must begin rewiring our brains by clarifying our thoughts and beliefs. The orientation of our mental processing and emotional expressions will either help us float or sink. We need to be reminding ourselves, and especially our children, of our positive aspects as we encourage each other to come up with ways to not only get ahead, but rise to prominence. Our music, our art forms, our architects, scientists, engineers, caregivers need to be highlighted, and the things we see, hear, and do must speak of and emphasize our greatness.